Actually, the liquidity is a big issue, and investors tend to hold to maturity, and no Sukuk market makers. That we are going to push these market makers in the near future, and certainly it's very rational that central bank is willing to buy only Sukuk repo issued by the government. And let's move to upcoming initiative. What we are going to do with this situation, illiquid market, secondary market, and still low of issuance, less than 5% compared with the bond. Even bond itself is still low. Now we have a pipeline in OJK for the issuance of Sukuk with two companies at around 1.5 trillion rupiah. But to cope with the market infrastructure, we really encourage to have a Sukuk market maker. And then we also need to have, the mercy also from the Minister of Finance that we want to develop a Sukuk-based Sharia mutual fund. And we also develop a Sharia repurchase agreement and Sharia hedging. And then what incentive do we need? OJK now, the Indonesian FSA, has already give a dividend levy for the issuance of the Sukuk. As you could see from the screen, if you issue Sukuk, registration fee is only 0.05% of issuance value and maximum of the 150 million Indonesian rupiah. And if you issue bond, the issuance value and maximum of 750 million. So we actually, because as an infant industry, Sukuk need to have an incentive. We also strongly and very aggressive in promoting in education, and also we invite also state-owned companies that we have them to issue Sukuk, and also with the help of Ministry of Finance and Ministry of State-owned Enterprises, we want that those who are relevant to infrastructure, the state-owned companies, they can issue Sukuk. And as we understand that the number of Sukuk infrastructure state-owned enterprises now is around 53 among 600. And we also increase the capacity building for market players involved in issuing Sukuk, which is issuer, underwriter, and the trustee. What strong government support that we need? We also want to have a clarity from the Directorate General of Taxes. We need to have specific laws or amendment are urgently needed to make tax uncertainties crystal clear to Sukuk issuers. And Directorate General of Budget and Financing and Risk Management, we want to have create special regulation that will allow investment managers to invest in sovereign Sukuk for Sukuk-based Islamic mutual fund. Because if they battle in the secondary market, so it's very tough. So they want to have, if possible, in a primary market. This is also part of the promotion. And for the Ministry of State-owned Enterprises, we need to have a top-down policy approach to encourage state-owned enterprises to issue Sukuk. How about the demand side? We need to enlarge investor base by encouraging institutional individual investors to invest in Sukuk. In many opportunities where we go to big cities in Indonesia and also to universities, even the question from the journalists, also they don't really understand about Sukuk and other Islamic or Sharia instrument. So we really encourage the workshop for institutional investors and public lecturing to universities, as we did a couple of times, and we will do again, and seminar for high school students, journalists, and other communities, and also we also put in curriculum. And we also want to have a broader access of investment for public in rural area. I think those are some of the portrait of corporate sukuk in Indonesia, and I hope this opportunity really drive us to understand more about sukuk and also drive the state-owned enterprises, those who deal with the infrastructure to issue sukuk, and this is the duty of the Indonesian FSA to provide the easiness of issuing sukuk, and also we really hope the incentive from the government, which is Minister of Finance, that we can have a tax incentive, because in other jurisdictions like in Malaysia, even in London, basically the growth of sukuk really pushed because of the tax incentive. And I hope this will be a great discussion among of you, and thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Mr. Sarjito, for the presentation on what you are doing in capital markets for promoting Sukuk in Indonesia. And now I would like to invite Dr. Walid Abdul Wahab. Dr. Abdul Wahab joined Islamic Development Bank in 1998 and currently is the Director of Infrastructure Department, where he looks after transport, water, energy, and ICT sectors in our member countries. Dr. Walid got his PhD degree from Canada, British Columbia. Yes, sorry. And he worked as Assistant Professor of Civil Engineering in Canada and Jordan before joining IDB. Please, Dr. Walid. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.
I come from IDB, and as all of you know, IDB stands for Islamic Development Bank, but it can very well also stand for Infrastructure Development Bank. And you will not even have to change the acronym, you can still use IDB. In fact, recently, as you know, the MDB Communities was joined by a new bank, which is called Infrastructure Bank, which is the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank in China. But IDB is all about financing infrastructure. And maybe this calls for a definition of what we mean by infrastructure. Now, everything about development landscape now the whole story starts from SDGs. And unlike their predecessor, the MDGs, now we have infrastructure in the heart of the SDG agenda. You can see very clearly here that we have 6 of 17 indicators. Number 6, 7, 9, and 11 are clearly and squarely addressing physical economic infrastructure like water and energy. And we also have indicators 3 and 4 on what we call social infrastructure relating to education and health. And by the way, I was very pleased to see Indonesia spending more of their budget on education than on infrastructure, although I'm a director of infrastructure. And I think Indonesia is probably the only member country of IDB where our portfolio in education is larger than our portfolio in infrastructure, despite the heavy capital asset class of these funds, it's only 0.8%. So in theory, if we are only able to increase their exposure to infrastructure asset class by 1.6%, that will fill the gap. But we know that this is not in theory, of course, and it's not. It's very difficult to achieve. I think now to link this picture, which is very grim, with the realities, it's very clear that Sukuk as a source, an alternative source of financing to infrastructure. So beyond the banks, which is the bulk, about 2/3, you have the multilateral banks, you have the governments, you have the long-term institutional investors, and then you have the Sukuk market. Unfortunately, in our member country, as this slide, which I borrowed from one of our colleagues in the bank, shows is underutilization of Sukuk for the purpose of infrastructure. I mean, as we heard from the professor, the term Sukuk is widely used, but there are so many variants and types of Sukuk. By the way, everything we finance in IDB is coming from Sukuk because we issue our own Sukuk, IDB Sukuk, which is corporate Sukuk, and we use those money to invest back in infrastructure. So in a way, you can say that all our financing in Sukuk. But what we mean here is actually project-specific Sukuk, which is an alternative source of financing. You can see that the 2/3 of the exposure for the last since up to 2011, I'm sorry this is not very up to date, is actually in Malaysia. And the GCC countries and Indonesia and even Turkey is not on the map in terms of exposure to project Sukuk is insignificant. And this is my last slide, which depicts the state of Islamic infrastructure development in our 56-member country. You can see, as expected, there is, of course, Malaysia and the Gulf countries have relatively developed infrastructure, Islamic infrastructure. Some countries have partial infrastructure, Islamic finance, but the bulk of our countries in Central Asia, and Africa, and Latin America have practically no infrastructure, Islamic infrastructure development. And I think the slide depicted earlier in Indonesia about financial survey literacy also collaborate that people are almost illiterate when it comes to capital markets and how can capital markets play a role in infrastructure financing. So these are my introductory remarks, and I will look forward for discussion further on. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let me check the time. Okay, we have enough time for questions and answers. So I would like to thank our panelists for their introductory remarks. So before coming back to you for your questions, let me ask one question for each panelist from my side, and then we continue with our audience questions. Of course, infrastructure, as mentioned by Dr. Walid, will be playing a key role, especially in this new ambitious global sustainable development agenda. It's a cross-cutting team, and it has a lot of positive externalities with many of the goals included in this new agenda. And on another platform, G20, for example, Indonesia is a member of G20, so infrastructure investment is one of the key areas where G20 is focusing through its working groups. And recently, global infrastructure hub has been established by this process. So, Professor Nazara, would you like to maybe indicate the expectations of Indonesia from this new global infrastructure hub that has been recently established by G20, not only for G20 countries, but also for all other countries? So what are the expectations? I know that they have recently published a knowledge report on this issue as design of the infrastructure projects will be key to attract especially the private sector in this financing side. So I would like to get your views and expectations and how we can make it more effective. Thank you. You came from here, yes.
Thank you, Safas. On the G20, I think Indonesia is pleased that we are leading one of the sub working group in the infrastructure, especially with the topic on the connectivity. So there are several other working groups, and then one other that I remember is the multilateral development bank financing, and we hope that this MDB financing will take a look at the Sukuk financing more and more as viable options for mobilizing financing for infrastructure development across in the world. Specifically on the connectivity, there is one very important point that Indonesia always brings to the connectivity in the infrastructure discussion under the G20. That is, I believe that when we talk about connectivity, and this is pretty much the case in Indonesia, people are started to think immediately about roads, about highway, about toll, about the sea lines, airports, seaports, airlines, and everything. Yes, of course, that is important. Is that kind of connectivity, the physical connectivity is very important, but we also would like to bring up the subject of the virtual connectivity. It is not the person and the goods, the people who are moving, but the information that are moving. So virtual connectivity, having digital divide in the world is very important as part of the connectivity issue and the infrastructure that we have to build. So building up the infrastructure is not only about building roads, but also internet access, knowledge on the internet, and then all the virtual knowledge development is very important. This is one of our move in Indonesian financial inclusion is to get cash transfer by way of the cellular phone, and the people who are receiving the cash transfer can bring the cellular phones to the post office, and the post office will pay the money. So they don't have to line up in terms of the post office. They can go any time. They can use the financial services as a way for the cash transfer. This is part of the combating the digital divide. So infrastructure, when we are talking about the infrastructure, it's not only physical, it is also virtual infrastructure. This is the topic that we always bring to the G20 forum. Thank you, Sofas.
Thank you, Professor Nazara. Now I'd like to move Mr. Sarjito now. As mentioned in both of your presentations, there's a huge infrastructure investment plans of the government in the next 4 or 5 years. And it seems that we have to expand the investor base to get the required financing. And you also mentioned in your presentation about retail scope that has been introduced by Indonesia. So can you kindly maybe give us a little more information about the retail Sukuk perspectives and how you will be supporting this in the upcoming years? And also, the Sukuk potential is largely unutilized as of now. And what are the specific plans that OJK have to make Sukuk more attractive for the investors in Indonesia?
Okay. Thank you. This is probably the first question fit to the next speakers, but I would like to answer for what is actually the expectation of the OJK to develop the corporate sukuk. At this opportunity, the authority of the OJK is on the corporate sukuk. Some of the activities that we have been doing are that we have to aggressively, I'm talking aggressively because we deal with the illiterate society in capital market, which is 97%, around that numbers, which is a huge duty for us to educate them, because in a sense, we don't want actually when Sukuk actually issued, than bought by foreign investors, corporate sukuk. We also hope that in general, like the equity market here in Indonesia, that we a bit not quite resilient with the perspective of the composition of the shareholders in our market, because 64% of the equity market now owned by foreign investors. That we do hope here, most Indonesian, those mainly a majority of Muslim society, that we become the investors, retail investors of not only government sukuk but also corporate sukuk. And by then, what we can do actually provide easiness of issuing sukuk, as I mentioned in my presentation before. And we cannot also, or JK cannot do on our own. We really rely on the government support, which is at this opportunity is very nice that we have our brother from Ministry of Finance. That tax incentive is very important, because other than that, it's very difficult to compete. Even for the bank, Sharia bank is also not quite competitive compared to the conventional bank. So to develop sukuk, other than educate our society on sukuk, Islamic instrument, what we call sukuk, but we also must provide liquidity in the secondary market and also make easiness for those who are potential issuers. And with respect to the today's topic on infrastructure, we do hope that Ministry of State of Owned Enterprises really push those who are around 53 of the companies who specialize on infrastructure, then later on issue corporate sukuk in capital market. And we hope that the liquidity is going to be much better, and we push to have a market maker and some other agenda that we have been doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarjito. Dr. Walid, Addis Ababa meeting, Financing for Development Conference, and adopted action agenda accordingly. Invited all the MDBs to establish this Global Infrastructure Forum, and the first meeting has been held in April in DC. So would you kindly inform us what are the outcomes of this forum? What kind of expectations now we have for the member countries? Because all MDBs participated to this forum, and they have made strong involvement in this process. So what are the outcomes for the member countries?
Well, thank you. Well, I think there is a document which is available on the website. It's a statement by the heads of the MDBs who participated in the Global Infrastructure Forum. It came as a direct response to the Addis call for action on financing the SDGs, and big part, as you saw, of the finding the financing resources for SDGs is for infrastructure. Now, this is also has been going on for a number of years. As you know, the MDBs have been gathering into forums. Now we have 9 of them. And the dialogue between that forum and the forum of governments, which is really the G20, has been going on intensively. I mean, Australia 2 years ago, Turkey last year, and now China. We have had 3 sustained years of focus on infrastructure. Infrastructure has been in the heart of the agenda of the G20, and they have been actually urging the MDBs to work together, as the professor mentioned. And there are a number of working groups. There is the MDB working group. There is the infrastructure investment working group. And we are being urged by the G20 to work together closely and to commit to more sustained infrastructure financing for the next 3 to 5 years. And those numbers that I shared with you, the $75 billion by the MDBs, is really coming as a result of those deliberation with the G20 and the United Nations process on the SDGs.
Thank you. Now I'd like to open the floor for questions from the audience. Can you kindly raise your hands and briefly introduce yourself by your name and institution? So we have one question from here and one sister here and one here. Let's have 3 questions in the first round. Do we have microphones for? Yes. Let's start from here. And please, microphone for brother there and our sister here. Yes, please.
Testing.
Please.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you very much. My name is Freddy. I'd like to raise my question to my colleague, Mr. Sajito. My question is about the plan of the Indonesian OJK to develop the ratings for the Sukuk. I'd like to ask Mr. Sajito to elaborate more about the program or the plan of OJK about this rating. Thank you.
Can you kindly repeat the question? Because
Okay, let me try to make it slower. One of
maybe we use the
the
mic.
program,
Yeah. You just use this, maybe it's better. Echo. Yeah,
okay,
we can kindly.
okay, thank you. One of the program that the Indonesian OJK is planning to do to develop the Sukuk in Indonesia is to develop the ratings for this Sukuk. So I would like to ask Mr. Sajito to elaborate more about this. What the plan of OJK to develop the ratings for Sukuk in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, next please. Yes, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Rusdi from CIMB Niaga. This question to Pak Sarjito. We really understand regarding the role of OJK that there are some things which has been addressed by government, especially regarding the tax neutrality. My question is, who is going to take up this to the government? Because if there's no one in the structure, our structure, we are still hanging fruits. We do not know how to address. And then the second thing, does OJK has a plan to have the Sukuk corporate law? If we see the historical, for example, when the government, they have the Islamic banking law, I think the business is growing. But when we talk to some investor, I think they're concerned regarding the Sukuk corporate law. And then for the Pak Nazara from BKF, we read in the news that the government they are doing they plan to amend the Undang-Undang Pajak Penghasilan. Is it including for the Islamic finance transaction or not? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Can we have the last question for the first round? Can we have the microphone to the front, please?
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Iva Atka. I'm still a student in Institute of Statistics. Studying economics and statistics. As we know that the price or the cost of infrastructure between the west of Indonesia, like Jakarta, Sumatra, and Extra, and between Jakarta and Sumatra, and the east of Indonesia, like Papua, Sulawesi, and Maluku, is different. And the cost of infrastructure in Papua is really higher from the west of Indonesia. I want to ask if there is the special force or the special program or policy of Indonesia using this Sukuk to reduce the cost of infrastructure in Indonesia, especially in the east of Indonesia like Papua, Sulawesi, and Maluku. Thank you.
Thank you. So I come back to our panelists. Yeah, Professor Nazara, first you, and then we have a question for Mr. Sarjito also. First,
Thank you.
Professor
There is one question about the revision of Indonesian income tax law, whether that will also include the Sukuk. In the revision of the Indonesian income tax law, which we scheduled sometime, hopefully no later than next year, there will be we need some time for all this discussion. We will revisit all dimensions of the income tax law in Indonesia. So I can tell you that the plan at this moment, it is not going to be like an amendment of the law, but it will be a complete overhaul of the law. So we hope that we will also include, so it is actually the answer is very simple. We will include all dimensions. So that is for Sukuk, also for the government bonds as well. So we hope to get your feedbacks actually. What are the elements that you would like to see in the upcoming revisions? To address the next question about whether Sukuk is possible to reduce costs in the infrastructure development, especially for our fellow Indonesians in the eastern region. At this moment, the government is using the Sukuk as part of the general budget financing. So every year, last year, for example, we run budget deficits. Last year was 2.5% of the GDP. Now, in order to finance that budget deficit, we are going to different sources. We sell bonds to the market, in conventional market, as well as in Sukuk market, in Islamic bonds market. In the Islamic bonds market, I can tell you that Indonesia is now one of the highest sovereign issuer, Republic of Indonesia. Next session will be more discussion about that. But then, what are the money is used for? The money is used for the budget. So it gets into the budget, and the budget is then spent on infrastructure. If we build enough infrastructure in the eastern region of Indonesia, then accordingly the cost of doing business in eastern region of Indonesia will also going down. So infrastructure will smoothening up the business, improve the investment climate, will be lower costs at the end of the day. So that is the link. So it is not something that is directly to reduce costs, but by using the Sukuk financing, we can build more infrastructure than we are capable of out of the tax revenue. We are capable to build more infrastructure. If we build more infrastructure, it will be promoting investment climate and reducing cost of doing business in more remote area in Indonesia. I hope this explains to your question. Thank you.
Sarjito?
Okay, I think I have two very good questions from my brother Freddy Saragi on rating of the Sukuk, and a second from my brother from the CIMB about the possibility of issuing corporate Sukuk law and also who actually handled this tax a bit problem. But Freddy, actually, we currently still treat the same way between issuing bond and corporate Sukuk. But actually, it is different thing, as our professor from Wharton School also mentioned before, that it must be different because rating for the Sukuk is not the same as a rating for the corporate bond, normal corporate bond. And also the bankruptcy thing. For the rating now, we have been discussing with the Pavindo and Fitch on possibility of make a special rating for issuing Sukuk, not like corporate bond, because we understand that Sukuk has a underlying asset, while corporate bond is not the same like the issuing Sukuk. So OJK now still in deep discussion on on doing these rating things, Mr. Freddy. I believe that later on we can find the good thing about this rating, even though in the international perspective, still the same for rating for the Sukuk and corporate bond. And we believe that it must be different. For our brother from CIMB, on the tax clarity with the Minister of Finance, we have been discussing this with the Minister of Finance, and it's very fruitful discussion. And according to Ministry of Finance, it was only the perception, but actually it is the same. But again, as some lawyers, international lawyers and investors need to have clarity, but we want from the Minister of Finance to issue not law, changing law, but implementing rules that can make it clear that this is actually treated as what we want. So we have been doing that. We also been discussing with the Minister of Finance and also from the Directorate of the Tax Office and even from other parties. So we are having a fruitful discussion. On the possibility of the issuing Sukuk law, it is like in other perspective, like Indonesia has currently don't have investment law. So we only rely on the capital market law. We don't have investment law. So growing on the Sharia instrument, so it is very possible that later on that we think if we really need that, so corporate Sukuk law can be issued. So we do hope on the development of the Islamic finance and also Islamic instrument, so we can adjust the possibility of that issuing a Sukuk law. We are discussing about that. Thank you.
Thank you. So given the time limitation, I will have one last round of questions. One brother here and one brother here. Okay. Do I have the microphone? Please, to be concise, one question, because we don't have time. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Dr. Saeed from Libya. I had attended your for 2 days now, and I thank for IDB Bank for the invitation. I think as we're a little bit far away from home, we have enough investment and fund to finance and invest in any private or public project. But we are looking for a relationship, because this is Sukuk, something new for us, where I come from. We look for an asset management or a regulator through IDB or the professional of Indonesia to help us to regulate our funds, which is we have them all over the world. And we are looking to invest in a private, and we want to re-immigrant those funds that we have all over the world to come back to Islamic communities such as Indonesia, Malaysia. And our funds at the moment is being managed by, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, those big names. We need to re-regulate and re-immigrant funds back to the Islamic world. So we look for a professional Muslim brothers like Indonesia, IDB Bank, to look at this proposal. As my country at the moment is under state of war, but we are now rebuilding Libya, hopefully, inshallah, the end of this year. We are not looking for funds. We have enough funds, but we look for management. And also we want to reinvest those funds back to the Islamic world. Thank you very much.
Thank
Assalamu
you.
alaikum.
So, Brother Walid, you can maybe comment on this. And next and last question from here. This side, we have microphone, please. Microphone? Yes.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My question, just quick. Mr. Freddy has explained before, has asked about ratings for Islamic Sukuk. And I think before you can have ratings, we should also ask what is Indonesia's track record for the Sukuk itself? Because if the track record is not good, then the will automatically show. So do we have some report where we can look at how the Sukuk is going? Because to say we have invested a lot in Sukuk or we have issued a lot of Sukuk just means I owe a lot of money now. But how am I doing in repaying those Sukuk? Jazakumullah.
Thank you. So let's start with the first question. Dr. Walid, you can comment. And maybe second question, Professor Nazara.
Thank you very
or
much. Question from Dr. Said from Libya. I think you will be pleased to know that IDB has four special departments that are specialized in addressing the kind of question that you raised. The first one, we have an Islamic Financial Services Department, which is mandated to develop the Islamic finance industry, and they will be more than happy to work with you. We have ERTI itself, of course, which is disseminating knowledge about Islamic finance products. We have the Capacity Development Department, which specializes in transferring knowledge and know-how between countries in a special field. So, for example, if you want to learn from Indonesia or Malaysia or any other country, they will be more than happy to assist in that. And when the time comes for the issuance itself, we have the private sector arm that does provide advisory services in issuance of Sukuk. So these are the four key departments. Some of the directors and the Director General of ERTI is here. They can also provide more information for you after the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Nazara.
Thank you. The second question. I think your question is a good question that some of the answers would be in the next session. But I will address one point that you raised about the issuing Sukuk means we owe a lot. Now, how much is a lot? Now, I can tell you that the Indonesian government debt to GDP ratio is currently 27%. 27% out of a GDP is not a lot. It is very manageable. If we look at our neighboring countries in the Southeast Asia, you will find other countries at 50-60% debt to GDP ratio. If you look at Japan, 250% of the GDP. So 27% in a micro sense is very manageable. Now, of course, the need of Indonesia to build infrastructure is a lot. Now, in the past, when we borrow money from overseas, the bulk of that money is used for fuel subsidy. Now we cut down the fuel subsidy, the bulk of that money is used for infrastructure. So, I can tell you that if we use the money wisely, then debt to GDP ratio that is increasing a little bit which is still under management is okay. Our current law limit our debt to GDP ratio at 60%. Now, there is no intention of the government to go too high, to go up too high. We are still comfortable at around 27% of the GDP, and we would like to maintain around that numbers. Now, if we would like to maintain that numbers, the next question is, where should we get the financing from? From the market. It comprises conventional market and Islamic Sukuk market, or we can also still making the best available of the loans. We have to manage that, and I think the next session, my colleague from the Ministry of Finance will tell you the government debt portfolio, how we manage that, and then more specifically, the management of the Sukuk, the Islamic bonds. I hope that is also a good introduction for the next session as well.
Thank you, and this will be a good note that we can end this session as we have already exited our time. I would like you to join me to thanking our distinguished panelists.
Check. May we have all the panelists and the discussion chair to remain on the stage? Sorry. To To all the panelists and the discussion chair, please remain on the stage. To all the panelists, dear Minister, to all the panelists and the discussion chair, please remain on the stage. And we kindly request to Professor Suhasan Nazara, the Chairman of Fiscal Policy Agency, Ministry of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia, to present the souvenirs to all the panelists and the discussion chair. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause to our speakers. And now, we are coming to the panel 2 with the topic Innovation in Sukuk Issuance. The discussion chair of this panel is Director General Islamic Research and Training Institute of IDB Group, Professor Muhammad Asmi Omar. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite to the stage Professor Muhammad Asmi Omar.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. We now would like to call upon three panelists for this session. The first panelist is Dr. Robert Pakpahan, Director General of Budget Financing and Risk Management, Ministry of Finance. Please, Pak Robert. The second speaker is Brother Rafi Hanif. Brother Rafi Hanif, he's the CEO of CIMB Islamic Bank Malaysia. Welcome. While they sort out, I hope you can stand. And the third speaker is, let me get, hold on. And the third speaker is Brother Adil Babika from ISAC, that is the Islamic Corporation for Insurance of Investments and Export Credit of the IDB Group. He replaces the CEO of ISAC. So, okay, ladies and gentlemen, what we are going to discuss next is on innovations of Sukuk. As being mentioned earlier on by Dr. Bambang Brojonegoro, the Minister of Finance, there are various types of Sukuk. If you look at the beginning, most of the Sukuk was structured on the basis of Murabahah, or sometimes also known in Malaysia as Al-Bait Bitamin Al-Jil Sukuk. And subsequently, we have Ijarah Sukuk, and then we have Mudarabah Sukuk, Musyarakah Sukuk, and then variants of those Sukuk include hybrid Sukuk, where we also have what we call the convertible Sukuk, exchangeable Sukuk. And lately, late 2014 as well as 2015, we have what we call as CSR Sukuk, the Gavi Sukuk, which was mentioned yesterday, if you are in the morning session yesterday, during the SDGs forum, mentioned by Dr. Jamila from the United Nations. the Gavi Sukuk, Sukuk for what we call immunization, and also June last year we have Sukuk Ihsan from Malaysia, issued by Khazanah Malaysia. So now we see there are many types of Sukuk and various types of innovations that are put forward in the market. Of course, Indonesia pioneered the retail Sukuk, and subsequently other countries have also followed suit, including Malaysia, on the issuance of retail Sukuk. So what's interesting is that you have originally started with sovereign Sukuk, and if you look in terms of the percentage of Sukuk being issued in the market, the largest percentage is sovereign Sukuk, followed by quasi-government Sukuk, and then we have corporate Sukuk. Then of late, which was started by Indonesia, is the retail Sukuk. So as you can see, there are various types of Sukuk in the market. So our three distinguished speakers will be sharing their perspective on the Sukuk. What I will do as a moderator of this session is to direct the discussion and subsequently allow you to ask questions to these three gentlemen. Bear in mind that Sukuk is a living subject, which means that it is going a tremendous innovation. So you will see from time to time new jurisdictions, be it in Southeast Asia or in the Middle East, that will be offering new Sukuk in the market. So in this way, what we can do and learn is to look at what has been offered in one country and try to also modify and replicate in another country. So with that introduction, I would like to now call upon Dr. Robert Patpahan, the Director General of the Budget, Financing and Risk Management of the Ministry of Finance, to deliver or share his thoughts on this particular topic. The floor is yours, Dr. Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Distinguished participants of the 41st IDB annual meetings, delegates, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. For the next 15 minutes, I'm going to share about Indonesian experience in the innovation of Sukuk, especially in the issuance of sovereign retail Sukuks by the government of Indonesia. Before explaining more specifically regarding the retail Sukuk, I would like to talk some experience in the Sukuk issuance of Indonesia. First, regarding the legal, the instruments and the structures that we have used. We issue two types of government bonds. Number one is conventional government bonds, and the second one is Sukuk Negara. The role of Sukuk Negara in our issuance now every year is approximately 24% in each year of issuance. And the portions of outstanding Sukuk from the total outstanding bonds of Indonesia currently around 15%. Under the law number 19 of 2008, sovereign Sharia securities or Sukuk Negara is defined as a sovereign securities issued based on the principle of Sharia as evidence of the participation in Sukuk Negara assets either in Indonesian rupiah or in foreign currency. We have 6 core instruments that you can see here so far. Number one is what we call SPNS, or Islamic Treasury Bills for short tenors, less than 1 year. Number two instrument is IFR, EFR, Islamic Fixed Rate, tenors medium to long terms. Underlying asset is fixed assets. The number 3 instruments that we also normally use is PBS, project-based Sukuk. As the name says, the underlying asset is a project of the government in the budget with the tenors medium to long. And then number 4 is Sukuk retail, SR, that I will explain later on more specifically, with the tenors around 3 years, and underlying asset currently is state budget projects and also fixed asset. Number 5 instruments that we also use is SDHI, Sukuk Dana Haji Indonesia, which is the Hajj funds of Indonesia. And lastly is SNI, Sukuk Negara Indonesia, which is our global US dollar Islamic Sukuk. So those are the 6 instruments that we have issued since 2008. There are 4 structures that we have developed. One is Ijara Sale and Leaseback. We also use Ijara Asset to be leased, for instance for PBS. Ijara Al-Hadamat,